Today we will do the last part of the Iswaran the storyteller, and if you want to see my previous video, please go to the link and the description and see the previous video, then it would be helpful for you. So let's start today. You know, sir, this entire factory area we are occupying was once a burial ground. He started. Who started? Iswaran started. He was telling a story, an adventurous story, a horror story to Mahendra, his owner. To Mahendra, he was telling a horror story, and that's why he was telling that, you know, sir, this entire factory area we are occupying was once a burial ground. The entire factory area which they were occupying was once a burial ground, and Mahendra was jerked out of the pleasant reverie he had drifted into after the satisfying meal. Mahendra was jerked out of the pleasant reverie. He was in a reverie, and from that reverie, after hearing the words from Iswaran, he was just startled. He was stunned. He had drifted into after the satisfying meal. I knew on the first day itself when I saw a human skull lying on the path. On the first day, he saw a human skull lying on the path. Even now, I come across a number of skulls and bones. Iswaran continued that he came across a number of skulls and bones on the very first day on the path, and still he was coming across a number of skulls and bones. Thus, he continued his story to Mahendra. He went to narrate how he sometimes saw ghosts at night. I am not easily frightened by these things, sir. I am a brave fellow, but one horrible ghost of a woman which appears off and on at midnight during the full moon. It is an ugly creature with matted hair and a shriveled face, like a skeleton holding a fetus in its arms. He went on to narrate his horrible story, how he sometimes saw ghosts at night, and he was not easily frightened by the ghosts. And he was telling that he was a brave fellow, but one horrible ghost of a woman which appeared off on and on at midnight during the full moon. During the full moon, a horrible ghost of a woman which appeared off and on at midnight. It was an ugly creature with his matted hair. What is the meaning of matted? Matted means tangled hair, which was tangled into a thick mass. Okay, matted hair, tangled hair, and a shriveled face, a face which was very dry, smaller, and covered with lines by folding or crushing. It's a dry face, like a skeleton holding a fetus in its arms. What is the meaning of fetus? Fetus meaning an offspring or a child. It was a skeleton. He saw a skeleton holding a offspring in its arms. It was a very horrible sight which Iswaran told to Mahendra. Mahendra shivered. He was shaken at the description and interrupted rather sharply. You are crazy, Sharon. There are no such things as ghosts or spirits. It's all a figment of your imagination. Get your digestive system examined and maybe your head as well. You are talking nonsense. Mahendra was severed at the description, at the horrible description, and interrupted rather sharply. You are crazy, Sharon. He was very crazy, and there were no such things as ghosts or spirits. It's all a figment. It's all was a figment of his imagination. So please check. He advised Iswaran to check his digestive systems whether it was all right or not. Next para. He left the room and had retired for the night, expecting Iswaran to sulk for a couple of days, but the next morning he was surprised to find the cook as cheerful and talkative as ever. He left the room and retired for the night, expecting Iswaran that he would sulk for a couple of days. He would be silent for a couple of days. Sulk means silent. He would be silent for a couple of days. But the next morning he was found. The cook was found as cheerful and talkative as ever. From that day on, Mahendra, for all his brave talk, went to bed with a certain unease. Every night he peered into the darkness outside through the window next to his bed. Every night he peered into the darkness. He saw through darkness outside through the window which was just next to his bed, and trying to make sure that there was no movement of dark shapes in the vicinity. There was no movement of dark shapes in the vicinity. What is the meaning of vicinity? The area near or surrounding a particular place. Here it refers to the surrounding place of their quarter or the area near their quarter. And Mahendra, every night Mahendra tried to make sure that there was no movement of dark shapes in the vicinity, in the surrounding area of their quarter. But he could only see a sea of darkness with the twinkling lights of the factory miles away. But he could see a sea of darkness. It was all about darkness, darkness, and darkness with the twinkling lights of the factory, which was miles away. And there was only, Mahendra could see only the twinkling lights of the factory, which was just some miles away. He had always liked to admire the milk-white landscape on the full moon nights. He liked to admire the milky white landscapes on the full moon nights, but after hearing Iswaran's story of the female ghost, he avoided looking out of his window altogether when the moon was full. When the moon was full, after hearing Iswaran's story of the female ghost, he avoided looking out of the window. One night, Mahendra was woken up from his sleep by a low moan close to his window. There was a low moaning sound just close to his window. At first, he put it down to a cat prowling around for mice. At first, he put it down to a cat. He marked that it was a cat who was prowling around for mice. But the sound was too guttural for a cat. But the sound was too guttural for a cat. It was so guttural that it could not be of a cat. Guttural meaning a hoarse sound made in the back of the throat. A hoarse sound made in the back of the throat. He resisted the curiosity to look out lest he should behold a sight which would stop his heart. He resisted his curiosity to look out, lest he should behold a sight which would stop his heart. He resisted his curiosity to look out into the darkness, because so that he could behold a sight which would stop his heartbeat. But the wailing became louder and less feline. But the wailing sound, but the moaning sound, which became louder and louder and less feline. Feline is a word which is related to the cat family, or cat or members of the cat family. The sound, wailing sound, which becomes very louder and less feline, less related to cat. Okay, next, he couldn't resist the temptation anymore. He couldn't resist his temptation of seeing, of looking out just behind his window. Lowering himself to the level of the window sill, he looked out at the white sheet of moonlight outside. Lowering himself to the level of the windowsill, he looked out at the white sheet of moonlight outside. There, not too far away, was a dark cloud. From clutching a bundle, Mahendra broke into a cold sweat and fell back on the pillow, panting. He was gasping and panting. As he gradually recovered from the ghastly experience, he began to reason with himself. He gradually recovered himself from a ghastly experience, an experience full of ghost. He began to reason himself. He began to reason with himself. He tried to make himself courageous, and finally concluded that it must have been some sort of auto-suggestion, some trick that his subconscious had played on him. After all, he comes to the conclusion that it was nothing but his subconscious mind which had played on him. That's why he saw those things and heard the sound. By the time he had got up in the morning, had a bath and come out to have his breakfast, the horror of the previous night had faded from his memory. Iswaran greeted him at the door with his lunch packet and his bag. Just as Mahendra was stepping out, Iswaran grinned and said, "Sir, remember the other day when I was telling you about the female ghost with the fetus in its arms? You were so angry with me for imagining things. Well, you saw her yourself last night. I came running, hearing the sound of moaning that was coming from your room." A chill went down Mahendra's spine. He didn't wait for Isharan to complete his sentence. He hurried away to his office and handed in his papers, resolving to leave the haunted place the very next day. Before going to office, Isharan greeted Mahendra at the door with his lunch pocket and his bag. Just as Mahendra was stepping out, Isharan grinned and said, Isharan peeped and said, "Sir, remember the day when I was telling you about the female ghost with a fetus with an offspring in its arms, and you were so angry with me for imagining things, but you saw herself, that woman ghost, last night, and I came running, hearing the sound of moaning that was coming from your room." A chill went down Mahendra's spine. A chill went down Mahendra's spine. He became very cold. He didn't wait for Iswaran to complete his sentence. He hurried away to his office and handed in his papers. He hurried away to his office and handed in his papers, resolving to leave the haunted place, the very next day. He resolved to left the haunted place the very next day, and he hurried away to his office and handed in his papers. Thus, if this story is completed. For my next video, please follow my channel Easy Learning with Nita. Thank you.